I turned on the news last night, and of course, everybody's talking about the shooting in Minnesota. And all they're talking about is gun rights and Second Amendment and what should we be doing? All I could think about was my friend Jill McMahon, who has written an incredible book right there called Bulletproof. And I was like, if I could talk to Jill right now, she would be livid about these conversations that are on literally every single news network, from MSNBC to CNN to Fox News to the local news. All anybody's talking about is, well, what do we do with guns? And all I can think about is Jill's voice in my ear going, we are having the wrong conversation in this moment. And that's why I wanted to bring you on. So, Jill, welcome back to the Hotland. I know you've been hanging out in Maine. It's great to have you back in
Uh,
Phoenix.
Thank you. I mean, I'm sorry that this is the reason that we're getting together today and holding a conversation, but it does make my heart happy to hear that you thought of me first thing when you were
Right away.
watching the messages that were being sent yesterday after the mass shooting in Minnesota.
Yeah. Okay. So you're a gun violence survivor yourself. And so,
Correct.
lest anybody think that Jill doesn't know what she's talking about, she has been there, done that. And she has
Yep.
written this book called Bulletproof. And I remember in our conversations, you talking a lot about what the conversation should be in the
Mhm.
first 24 hours. Like last night is far too soon to be going after all of the gun conversation, right?
And it's not working. So, let's just start there. This is a formula or a rhetoric that we've now been using in the United States for decades, Matthew. And I don't see that formula is working. So, this is the way that I see it. And this is what I think that you're telling me that you witnessed last night. When a devastating mass shooting occurs in this country, we immediately hear the news, ask who's the shooter, where did they get their weapon, and who's to blame. The formula has been the same for decades and decades. What we're missing is a very important population, and that's the survivor. Because we go through that protocol. Who was the shooter? Where'd they get their weapon? And who failed us? But it's that third thing that turns political, right? To your point, then the political rhetoric comes in. And I'm not saying that there's not a place for that. But unfortunately,
100%.
right. Thank you. I think you and I align there. There is a place for that conversation. But I think we all need to stop and pause and realize that there's a big part of the conversation that we are all just ignoring. And that is the survivors, right? So we go through that formula, we ask those three questions, and you and I have seen it many times before. Then we get stuck in the loop of the political rhetoric, legalizing guns, not legalizing guns, stronger gun laws. How did this individual get their hands on this weapon? And we're moving further and further apart from the victims that were just catastrophically impacted by this event. 14 days goes by, and you and I know there's going to be another event somewhere in the world that's going to hit the
Is that the
headlines.
statistics every 14 days?
No, and I'm not actually saying
Oh,
that a mass shooting is going to occur within 14 days. I'm just talking about the news cycle, right? So
right.
we have this big event that will happen in this country. We will all be up in arms and enraged about it. And about 2 weeks later, another catastrophic, even if it's natural disaster event, will happen somewhere in the world, and we will all of a sudden just kind of move on and turn the page. But what's missing in the center there? It's the humans that have been impacted by this event. So I don't think that it's intentional, but to me, it's really blaring. There is this entire population, and you and I have had this conversation before. 54% of the United States says that they have been impacted in some way by gun violence. 54%. So we're not talking about that population after a mass event. Instead, we're talking about who was the shooter, where'd they get their gun, and who's to blame. And there isn't, what I think needs to happen is there needs to be time and space to honor and think about the decades of effects that these individuals will experience after taking a part in one
Okay.
of these mass shooting events.
I'm glad you said it, because for me, what was making me so angry last night was I was thinking, okay, yes, we're having this gun conversation and that's all fine and dandy because there is a time and a place to have this discussion. But these folks just experienced something that will likely lead to generational trauma for their families for years and years and years to come. Um,
Yep.
Look, these young kids that died, that impacted mom, dad, that impacted brothers, sisters, that impacted aunts and uncles, that impacted grandparents.
Mhm.
And this is going to leave a hole in their life for the rest of their lives. And it's going to have a major impact on the next generation and the next generation. And that's what I was thinking about last night. I thought, why does the news, and look, I get it. We want to know who did it. We want to know how did they get their gun. We want to know who's responsible, but let's just answer that
Sure.
question and then move on to the important part of this, which is, how do we help these people now? And what do we do for the survivors here? And how do we lean into them so that they feel support? And because they don't feel supported when all anybody's doing is talking about gun control. That's not it's not a comforting thought, I don't think. You're the expert. You tell me.
So maybe we just need to change the narrative to acknowledge the gun violence survivor. What if we just started there? Right? So
What does
we
that look
just
like?
talked about the formula that we have been utilizing in this country for decades. But nowhere within that formula is acknowledging that there is this entire population that is growing every year, gun violence survivors, not acknowledging them of their experience and the long-term effects. So I think it's important too that we define who a survivor is when it comes to these events.
Okay, let's go.
I think there's a misconception that the survivors had to face a gun themselves. And I'm going to tell everybody that from a psychological point of view, a survivor is not only the person that stared down the barrel of a gun, but it's a person that was in the room, and it's the first responder, and it's the parents that were standing outside hoping that their children are actually going to leave that church. It is if I'm using the example from earlier this week, it's the clergy that have made that church their home. That is their safe space and has been for years and years and years. It's the community member that heard a shotgun go off. It's the individual on the other end of a phone that heard a guttural scream that they will never forget for the rest of their lives. It is the emergency room doctors that are removing bullets or attempting to save adults, children. It is the family members of a shooter. So we need to start redefining who survivors are, because I think as a culture, once we gain a better understanding of how big this population is and how big the ripple effect is, and then understand that this has long, deep psychological wounds. So if we take those things into effect, my friend, it's really easy to see that so much of our society right now is walking around with a frazzled nervous system. Talking about that generational hurt, right?
Yeah, I think the question that I wonder is, if Jill McMahon, author of Bulletproof, which is on the screen right now, were to run the news cycle, what would you be advising all of these news anchors to talk about tonight? What would be the lead story tonight?
I would advise them first and foremost to mix it up, because what we've been doing isn't working and people aren't listening. They're actually turning the channel. I will tell them that one thing that they're doing is beautiful and correct, and it's new. It's that they're not giving as much attention to the shooter, right?
Yes, that is something that has started. Like, we've answered that question, and now we're not going to give this guy the satisfaction of talking about him anymore.
Exactly. And there's a lot of reasons why that's being done. And all of that is a great step in the right direction. But I want us to pause and really acknowledge the long-term effects for the people that were on site, for the caregivers that are going to be taking care of these children. For the grandparents that are going to be caring for their adult children who will forever fear that their young children aren't going to come home from school. So I think first and foremost, I just would love to see the 5 o'clock news spend some time acknowledging the long-term psychological hurts that transpire after one of these mass events, right? And I would love to see there be a pause on the political rhetoric. I don't know what that looks like, a couple days, a week, but maybe not straight into, and this Republican representative from the state of Iowa says, right, it's not helping us. If I were to ask, a news station to report it differently, I think I would ask them to maybe weeks or months after an event, highlight a survivor's experience. Go and interview somebody 2 weeks later or 2 months later that has lived through one of these terrifying events and ask them how they're doing now and who they're talking to and if they feel the same, right? That's what we need to start acknowledging. I got a beautiful message on LinkedIn this morning from a woman that saw a post that I posted yesterday. I don't know her. And she said to me, Jill, I'm a gun violence survivor and I never speak about it publicly. So I want us all to think about that for a minute because we don't create an atmosphere that welcomes that conversation. She said, I never speak about it publicly because there's so much that comes with the conversation and it makes people uncomfortable. And she said, but your post yesterday gave voice to survivors. And that's what we've been missing for so long.
I couldn't agree more. Bulletproof is the book. Now more than ever, people need to get their hands on this and just read it. Survivors and non-survivors, people that are just interested in this conversation and the different side of this conversation. You know how I feel about you, Jill. Thanks for coming on and just chatting this up with me for a little bit. I'm gonna give you the last word, though. What should the collective, meaning you, me, and the people that don't live in Minnesota, will never meet these people from Minnesota, what can we just be doing today? Is this just a day for prayer and meditation and thoughtful reflection, or like what is today good for?
Today's a day for you to call everybody that you know in your life that's been impacted by trauma in some way and just check in with them and say, I love you. It doesn't have to be a gun violence event. It could be losing a parent to a car accident. These events unfold in front of us on television, and they're triggering for so many individuals that have been traumatized in some way in their life. Call that person, check in, remind them that they're not invisible. They're a population we have not forgotten.